Good evening and welcome back into the Toasted Tavern. I'm your host, Michael Wanknecht, alongside Scott Tobin. Yes, we are back. We had some health issues. COVID sucks still 4 years later, but we are back in action. And boy, oh boy, do we have a lot of really intriguing things to talk about. Lots of things going down in Major League Baseball. We got teams on the rise. We got the All-Star game selections out. We've got trade deadline on the horizon. We've got preseason, off-season stuff going on in the NBA and the NHL. Some kind of big things going on in both those leagues. We've got football talk, and I actually should say it's more soccer talk than football talk, but we will talk a little bit about the NFL, but some incredibly intriguing games going on in the Euros and in Copa America as well. So soccer in the realm of the sports world as well right now. And we also have a fun little topic that we're going to talk about as well. Something about some hot dogs that were eaten over the weekend on July 4th. So we'll talk a little bit about that and Joey Chestnut and everything that went down with that a little bit later in the show. But first off, been a couple weeks since we got a chance to talk to each other. You were actually out sick the last time we were actually on, had Mason on. It was around Father's Day weekend. But how are things going, and how have you been enjoying this Independence Day weekend?
Good, man. Good. Yeah, I was sick. Didn't have to deal with COVID like you did, but I had a pretty nasty flu that knocked me down for pretty much a week. So I kind of understand what you're going through. But yeah, good holiday weekend, man. Got to spend some time with family, and then to round out the weekend last night, I was at Busch Stadium with about 40,000 people for a good old classic rock and roll show. We saw some Cheap Trick, we saw some Journey, and we saw Def Leppard kick off their stadium tour in St. Louis last night, man. And there were about 42,000 people at Busch Stadium for that show. And got to tell you what, Journey's celebrating their 50th anniversary. Def Leppard's Pyromania album, which was their first big one, is at 40 years. Those boys can still put on a show. And Cheap Trick was really good as well. But, yeah, Journey and Def Leppard were amazing.
Well, I was driving by on my way back from Belleville calling the HRFC game, and I saw everything kind of going down as I passed by Busch Stadium. It looked like it was a lot of fun. It looked like it was electric. And not only that, we also had Bret Michaels here out in O'Fallon on July 4th for their Heritage Festival as well. And from what I understand, he absolutely killed it. I say that because my mom and my sisters were there, and they're absolutely in love with him. And they said that. So apparently Bret Michaels still kicking butt as well, doing what he's doing. So lots of really great 80s rock and roll bands in the St. Louis area this weekend. And really, you couldn't have asked for a better weekend to put these shows on. Yes, it was a little hot, but it is the middle of July. Outside of that, though, I think things were pretty nice.
Yeah, they really were. We were talking about that last night at the show because 2 years ago, 4th of July weekend, Def Leppard, Poison, Motley Crue, and Joan Jett were at Busch Stadium, and it was 106 that day. So the 89 that we dealt with yesterday felt pretty darn good.
Well, yeah, and unfortunately, we're going to probably be back up into the 90s a little bit later on this week, although we may have some rain the next couple of days as well, which could ruin a couple of interstate games that the Cardinals are going to have against the Royals coming up on Tuesday and Wednesday. So let's cross our fingers that the rain stays away for those two games. And before that, though, they got to get one more win in Washington there in the nation's capital for a 4-game series. And let's just dive in right there and talk about the Cardinals and what's going on in Major League Baseball right now, as we're about a week away from the All-Star break. All-Star selections came out today. Cardinals still in the midst of a road trip, one more game before they come back home. And we talked about this a couple of times already on this show that, coming into this season, there was a lot of hemming and hawing about this Cardinals team. Were they going to have the pitching that they needed? Were the guys that needed to be hitting, will they hit? Where do they fall in this division? And, things started off a little sketchy for this team, as I think everybody was expecting it to, but they have completely turned things around. The questions that were asked at the beginning of the season have, to this point, been answered for the most part. There have been some road bumps along the way, but for the most part, this team is a little bit exceeding expectations, I think, because people thought this team was going to be last place, second to last place throughout most of the year. And at this point right now, they're sitting 5 games out of the Milwaukee Brewers for first place in the NL Central. They're sitting in the second wild card spot. And there's some statistics I'm going to throw at you a little bit later here that make you sit back and go, wow, this team is actually a little bit better than we thought. But I just want you to kind of take us through what you've seen in the last couple of weeks with this Cardinals team before we really kind of dive into the statistics and why we think this team might be better than they are.
Oh, they're a ball club that has come into their own. We started off the season and struggled because we weren't hitting. The offense was really, really struggling. The pitching from the get-go pretty much has stepped up and been better than a lot of people expected. But, you're seeing a bunch of young kids figured out at the major league level. I mean, this team would be in really bad shape, because we all know and everybody's talked about it that Goldie and Arenado haven't been Goldie and Arenado to this point in the season, although cross your fingers, maybe that's starting to turn around. But, I mean, we came into this scene going, man, Mason Wynn's going to be a great defensive shortstop. But how many times did we hear in spring training, if he hits 200, hopefully he hits 200, he hits 220, he can stick around up here all year. Well, the kid's hitting almost 300. He's got the best line drive percentage in the National League in hits. He's second, I think, in rookies in batting average. He's in the top 5 in just about every offensive statistic for a rookie. Plus, he's played Gold Glove defense. You and I were talking about it before the show came on. I've criticized him a million times, but I'll admit right here on this show I was wrong about Alec Burleson. He's figured it out, and not only is he hit clutch, he's got more RBIs in the last 3 weeks than anybody else in the National League, and it's not even close. He had like 19, and the next highest person had like 12. So, I mean, he's definitely come up clutch, and he's turned himself into a really good outfielder. What can you say about Brendan? Where would this team be without Brendan Donovan? I mean, the guy plays Gold Glove defense absolutely everywhere. He gets on base, and is there anybody you want on this team more in a clutch spot than Brendan Donovan? I mean, he takes unbelievable at-bats. He's turned into the guy you want him to, and then other guys have stepped up. Wilson Contreras went down. Ivan Herrera stepped up. Ivan Herrera gets hurt. Pedro Paez, who isn't even supposed to be past Double-A right now, has stepped up and done a great job at the plate and defensively. Dylan Carlson, for as maligned as he is, has come up with some big RBIs the last couple of weeks. Brandon Crawford stepped up and gotten big hits. Matt Carpenter has gotten on base and gotten some key hits off the bench the last couple of weeks. I mean, everybody's stepping up and doing what winning ball clubs do, and everybody contributes, and it's the next guy up, and we're seeing it. And, they believe that they're going to win now. They won 32. They're 32-18 in their last 50 games. When, they were 15-24 and everybody had given up on this team Mother's Day weekend, and look what they've done since then. And I think they're only going to get better because, as you and I talked about before we got on here, your projected starting outfield hasn't played an inning together this year. You're going to get Nootbaar back. He probably would have been back in this Washington series, except you're facing 5 lefties in a row, which when does that happen? You'll probably get him back in Kansas City, and then knock on wood, I'll believe it when I see it, but Tommy Edman is starting a rehab in Springfield on Tuesday. So you may get those 2 guys back, and this team may just get better the next couple of weeks, and I'm kind of long-winded on my answer, but I'm excited about this ball club if you can't tell.
Yeah, well, that 32-18 mark is the best in Major League Baseball since May 12th. So that was one of the stats I was going to throw out there, and that's just incredible. I mean, you got to go back and we talked a little bit about it after it happened, after the fact. That game against Milwaukee when Ali Marmol was tossed and he was fired up and all of that, and the Cardinals ended up winning that game. People were like, okay, it happened, but there were people that were like, mark that moment, because that is a moment that could change a season. And to this point, it has. I mean, to go 32-18 against some pretty good teams in that stretch. Yes, there have been some clunkers for sure, especially yesterday's game against Washington. But again, you're not going to win every single game. You're going to have bad games. It's going to happen. But then you look at, the team ERA since in the last 30 days, third best in Major League Baseball, 3.63. That's not just the bullpen. That's not just a couple of select starters. That's the entire team. So that is starting to click and go well together. And then you look at, and this is the thing that really, I think, kind of shocked me, and it doesn't so much now that you know what they've done since May 12th, but the Cardinals in just starting the 4th month of play, they've had 1 month where they've been under 500. And in that month, which was April, they were only 1 game under. They were 11-12 in April, 13-12 in May, 16-12 in June, and they're 4-2 already in July. So you look at that and you go, okay, yes, maybe they're not world beaters right now, but they're winning games and they're having positive months. And that's exactly what you need to do. You need to win series. You need to split or win series. You don't have to sweep every single one of them. You just have to win series. That's what's going to get you into the playoffs. And here's what you've seen in the last 5 series. They're going to at least split with Washington. They got one more game tomorrow. They won a series against Pittsburgh. They swept San Francisco. They beat Atlanta. And then they split with Cincinnati. So those are the last 5 series. It was split one, swept. So they've done that against some really, really good teams as well in Atlanta, San Francisco, and Cincinnati especially. So they're starting to put things together. And then you look at the schedule that they have coming up. And going into the All-Star break, it's 1 against Washington, 2 at home against Kansas City, which they're a team that's a sneaky good team as well. Yes, they've fallen off a little bit, but they're right there. And then you got a 4-game series with the Cubs at home leading into the All-Star break. Talk about having just an epic way to end your first half of your season. They very well could sit there and make a run at Milwaukee before this All-Star break hits. But then coming out of it, you got Atlanta, Pittsburgh, Washington, and Texas. So not an easy start to the second half of the schedule as well.
No, it's not. And August gets really tough when you start looking at that, because then you got the Yankees and the Red Sox, and the Brewers a couple of times.
Dodgers.
So things get tough. But this team has proven that they can beat good teams. I mean, like you just said, you beat Atlanta. You took 2 out of 3 from Atlanta. You swept San Francisco. We swept Baltimore earlier in the season. Yeah. We took 2 out of 3 from the Padres. You played the Phillies tough. The Phillies have won both series, but you look at those 6 games you played against the Phillies, and you literally could say the Cardinals could have won every one of those games. So, I mean, they've something that we couldn't say the last couple of years because they couldn't play with the good teams the last few years. They're playing competitive baseball. They're in pretty much every game they play. I mean, they've played more 1 or 2 run games than any team in baseball, and they've got a really good record. I mean, you just have to give everybody credit. And we talked about guys stepping up, and, you talk about the position players, but my God, you've got to give that bullpen credit. And we talk about the big 3, and they've done their job. Helsley, Kittredge, and JoJo have been amazing. But you got to give Mo some credit, because Mo went out and people were underwhelmed what he did with this bullpen. Remember when people were mad that the Cardinals traded Richie Palacios for Andrew Kittredge? That trade worked really well. People went, oh, they got some Rule 5 guy from the Red Sox named Ryan Fernandez. Look at what he's done compared to every other rookie reliever in baseball. Where did Chris Roycroft come from? I mean, that guy looks like a freaking stud. And then the other guy that everybody wanted to give up on because, oh my God, we traded Randy Arozarena and this guy's a bum. Look out, because Matthew Liberatore's turning into the pitcher that we all hoped he would be right in front of our eyes. Whether you put him in the rotation or the bullpen now, the kid's finally figuring it out. And you know what? People want to say, oh man, how much time are you going to waste on this kid? He just turned 24, people.
Yeah.
Matthew Liberatore may be the beast that everybody wanted him to be, and he may be the huge piece of your starting rotation next year. And if not, he's a monster in that bullpen, because nobody can hit him, because that slider is just unhittable when he comes out of the bullpen.
Well, and one guy that is kind of getting lost under the radar on this, and it's more so just because he's doing what you expected from a 5th starter. You can't discredit what Andre Palante has done in that 5th starter spot as well. I mean, against Pittsburgh, he went 4 hits, 1 earned. It's a home run, 1 walk, and 5 strikeouts. He struck out 5 in his last 3 starts. He's struck out at least 4 in 5 straight starts. And really, the only start that he didn't strike out at least 4 was that, debacle in Houston where he gave up 6 runs. Outside of that, he struck out at least 4 in all of the games that he has started. And yes, the walks have been a little high as well. He's had 4 games where he's walked 3 batters. But again, it's a guy that's giving you at least 5 innings and keeping you in ball games. He's given up, outside of the Houston and San Francisco games, he's given up 1 earned run or less in the rest of his starts. And for a 5th starter, that's all you can expect. And with the way the bullpen has pitched, just to be able to get through 5, if maybe a little bit longer, that's exactly what you want from that spot. So for all the people that are like, man, Palante, 5th starter, he's done exactly what you needed him to do. Now, how long does it last? Who knows? But if he can get you to the trade deadline, you can get maybe a 1 or 2 at the deadline, slide everybody else down. You don't need him to be that 5th starter. And then you stretch him back out, get him back into the bullpen, and all of a sudden your bullpen's stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at it, and there's all kinds of things. Yeah, if you can if he can get you to the trade deadline, like you said, and then, you don't have to worry about him as a starter. You put him back in the bullpen. Liberatore can focus on the bullpen, and then that just makes you that much deeper. And like we said, this team could be really scary. I was listening to John Rooney the other day, and he did an interview on the radio, and then he also did one with either Katie Woo or Derek Gould, I'm not sure. But John Rooney basically said, he had talked to Mo and he had talked to the DeWitts, and this isn't one of those years where the Cardinals are saying, the front office is saying, let's just get in the wild card and get in the playoffs. They're saying we want to win the division. And Rooney said, this could be one of those years. This might be, I don't want to throw this out there and say it too much, but this might be a 2009 where at the trade deadline, the Cardinals went and got Mark DeRosa, and they went and got, and they went and got Matt Holliday, and then they went and got John Smoltz. I mean, to make a run, because they'd missed the playoffs for a couple of years. So maybe this is one of those years where the Cardinals do go get one of those. I'm not going to say an ace because I'm not sure there's going to be an ace out there, but one of those higher quality starters, and maybe they are able to find a right-handed bat off the bench that can play a little bit of outfield that can help them out. And maybe they really can make a run because this team is coming together at the right time.
Well, let's get into that trade deadline talk here in just a second. Let's take a quick break. Let's thank one of our sponsors, and then we're going to come back and talk a little bit about what we can expect at the trade deadline, talk a little bit about the all-star rosters as well. We'll be back right here on Toasted Tavern. All righty, trade deadline. That's going to be coming up after the all-star break. Going to be very intriguing, not just for the Cardinals, but for a lot of teams, because a lot of teams are still in the hunt. And let's kind of focus in a little bit on what the Cardinals potentially could do, some of the rumors that have been going around as well. And we can also talk about who else might be available for other teams as well. The one that kind of has gotten a little traction right now, and it's not so much a rumor of who's going to who and all that stuff, but a couple of names that have kind of been thrown out there. One that is intriguing, but I don't think it's going to happen. And one from the Cardinals that is something that I don't know if they should even consider. But the names of Jordan Walker and Vlad Guerrero Jr. have been bandied about as potential for the Cardinals. And I saw you shaking your head, and I think I'm in the same boat as you. I don't think you give up on Jordan Walker right now. Everybody's complained about so many of these Cardinals players that have been traded before they were ready. You just talked about a guy like Arozarena. Walker would be kind of in that same vein. And Vlad Guerrero, while it would be awesome to see him in a Cardinals uniform, there's too many high dollar suitors that are coming after him. And I don't think the Cardinals have the makeup of players that Toronto would want to get a guy like Guerrero into this position. And if you did trade for a Vlad Guerrero, that to me would signify that you're interested in moving on from Paul Goldschmidt as well. And that is something that is a little for me as well.
Yeah, I just don't see Vladdy being a fit for the Cardinals because, like you said, his offense would be awesome. His defense, where do you play him? Do you play him at first base? Yeah, he's okay. He's not Paul Goldschmidt. Very few people are Paul Goldschmidt defensively. And, the Cardinals are not big on going out and getting guys that are just DHs, which in a year or two, with the size that Vladdy is, that may be all Vladdy Guerrero is. Just because he's a bigger guy and he may get bigger as he gets older and may not be that move around first base that well. So I don't see that being that big of a move. Plus, Jordan Walker, well, first of all, Jordan Walker for Vladdy Guerrero is not going to happen. It's going to be Jordan Walker and 4 or 5 other players at this point. But, there's people that want to give up on Jordan Walker. The kid just turned 22, and let's forget that this is the first time he's really played in AAA. And, the Cardinals kind of screwed him up a little bit. Let's be honest, because he was doing really well. He wasn't hitting he wasn't hitting a ton of home runs early last year, but they sent him to the minor leagues because they wanted him to work on launch angle. He went down to AAA and he struggled. And then he finally started hitting, and they said, well, what did you do? And he said, well, I pretty much forgot what they told me and went back to what's always worked for me. And he hit, and he came back up here, and then he hit 16 home runs. Well, kind of the same thing happened this year. He didn't hit a home run in spring training. You got into the regular season, and he was hitting on ball on the ground way too much. But what you could see was he was also trying to sell out for home runs. And he was dropping his knee, and he was almost putting his knee on the ground and trying to lift everything. And he was driving the ball into the ground. And so we had to send him back to the minor leagues again because, okay, you're hitting the ball on the ground. You got to hit the ball in the air. Launch angle, launch angle, launch angle, which, leave the kid alone. Like Jim Edmonds said, let the kid be an average hitter. Let him hit line drives. And he's 22. In a couple of years, the power is going to come. He's as big and strong as he is. It's going to happen. But it's screwed him up, and it's taken him, pretty much the first half of the season to start to get into a little bit of a rhythm in Memphis, and he's still not there. He's only hitting like 240 and he's got 3 or 4 home runs, but he is starting to hit some doubles. So, I wouldn't give up on that. And like I said, that's going to take way too much to get Vladdy. And then you got to think about re-signing him and all of that stuff. So I think that you don't make that move. Plus, let's be honest, starting pitching is really, really what we need at this point.
Yeah, and Mike Tackett makes a great point. Vlad's going to want at least $19.9 million a year after this year when he gets that new deal. So you're not trading just for a rental player. You're trading. You make that trade for the future and somebody that's going to be with you for long term, and you have to make that financial commitment. So that's something that the Cardinals just don't do. And to your point with Jordan Walker, I mean, we were talking just a little while ago about the fact that you've had guys that have stepped up and risen to the occasion. And that's actually allowed a Jordan Walker to continue to get those reps down at AAA as well. And that's something that you need for a guy that he didn't play at AAA before coming up to the Cardinals last year. So, it's nice for him to get those opportunities and to get those reps and find the right way to get about his swing. And then he can come back up here because you said it. We saw it last year. They sent him down. He hit the way he hit, came up and did what he did here. Well, then they came back this year, tried to teach him the same thing, same struggle. Now he's back down in AAA and he's starting to figure things out a little bit. So that should signify to the Cardinals, hey, we want to teach this specific philosophy, but in certain cases, maybe we don't to some of these guys and see what happens because it seems to work for Jordan Walker to not listen to what they're preaching. And you don't want to set the precedent of, oh, well, if you think you can do better, don't listen to us and you'll be fine. But I think in this instance, it's okay because there is a bit of a track record of this happening year after year. If there was a one-time thing, okay, you could chalk it up as him being a young player and just hasn't figured out the way that philosophy works. But this is the second year that it's happened. Maybe you sit there and make those adjustments to how you go about bringing him along as well. And now let's flip it over to those starting pitchers that you were talking about, that exactly what the Cardinals need. And I know I say that considering we just said that this team has one of the better ERAs overall in Major League Baseball, but how long is it sustainable is the question. And with that being the case, who is a guy that could come in here that the Cardinals A can afford and B would fit into their rotation at the right spot?
I mean, there are a few guys out there, we've still got about 3 weeks, and there are going to be some teams that are still going to fall out, and some guys that you don't think there's any chance will be available right now could become available. But, there's guys out there, and you're hearing rumors, and some of the names that you're hearing aren't going to make people go, oh, my God, yeah, that sounds great. But, a guy whose name's been brought up a few times, Kevin Gausman in Toronto, would be a really nice number 2 to put in behind Sonny Gray going into the postseason. I mean, the guy's been a stud before. He was a Cy Young candidate in the National League with the Giants a few years ago. He's done well in Toronto. We've seen names like, Tyler Anderson with the Angels, who's a lefty. He's been an all-star a couple of times. Again, not a real sexy name, but a guy that you could put in there, would be a left-handed guy, would be a solid 2 or 3 that you put in the middle of that rotation and would eat innings and would win some games for you. You hear name, a guy like Dylan Crochet in Chicago with the White Sox. Are the Cardinals willing to go do what it takes to get a guy like that? I don't know. How many teams are going to be involved, and what are the White Sox going to ask for him? It'll be interesting to see. And then, like I said, there are some teams that are going to be on the fringe that, man, could there be a guy? And I'm going to say this right now: if the Cardinals keep rolling, and if they keep struggling, and we get closer to the trade deadline, be prepared for the rumors. We hear them every year. But can you say Max Scherzer to the Cardinals?
Oh, my.
Do I think it'll happen? Probably not. But if the Rangers keep struggling and the Cardinals keep making that run, those rumors are going to pop back up again because Scherzer's pitching pretty well in Texas. I mean, the Rangers are not playing well. They're not hitting. Their bullpen's not very good. Their defense isn't very good. But Max has pitched pretty well since he's come back. So, I mean, that's a name that, we love to throw around because we love to bring those St. Louis kids back home, and everybody's wanted it for a long time. So, that rumor will at least fly a couple of times before the trade deadline ends.
Well, we'll circle July 29th through the 31st, and keep your eyes because the Rangers will be in town for that series against the Cardinals. It's a Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Will Max Scherzer be on the team flight home on Wednesday? We'll have to see if that's the case. I mean, that's a really, really intriguing idea. I mean, he's a guy, like you said, he's local. He's shown that he can pitch in those big moments. And honestly, yeah, he could be your top of the rotation guy, but you've got a guy like Sonny Gray where you don't necessarily have to have a Max Scherzer be your number one. And to be able to throw a guy like that out there as your number two in a playoff series, that would be a very scary proposition for any team that would face the Cardinals in the playoffs.
Well, and imagine with the way this bullpen's set up, you get in the postseason and say, okay, Max, go out there for 5 innings and just let it eat. Throw everything you've got, get us through 5, and then we'll bring the bullpen in and let them finish it for you. That might be something that's tempting for Scherzer because we know that he's always wanted to come home and pitch in St. Louis. He's another one of those guys. Hopefully, maybe he gets that opportunity. We know Mark Burley always wanted to pitch in St. Louis, and those rumors always flew, and Burley never got the chance to finish. Maybe Max does. But, there are a lot of other guys out there, too, that could still be interesting to see what happens. And I think there's going to be some more names, like we said, that you don't expect that could end up being out there as we get closer to the trade deadline.
Well, and Kyle Gibson was one of those that, you had been talking about for a handful of years that thought would fit here in St. Louis. Obviously, he has St. Louis connections, wasn't born and raised here, but he has the St. Louis connection, and he's come in and pitched very, very well for this team. Kind of got himself on the fringe of an all-star selection as well, considering his record 7-3, and he's pitched very, very well for this club. So, yeah, I mean, you get a chance to bring a guy. Yeah, he's going to be 39. He's in his year 39. So he's getting up there in age. But again, if you can sit there and say, yeah, go out and give me 5 innings and let the bullpen close things out, and you only have to pitch once in the series and then you're done to the next one. I mean, that's a really pretty good proposition for a guy like Scherzer if he can come in and maybe pitch this team into a playoff series win here and there, and maybe a berth in a World Series. Who knows? But it wouldn't be bad because I believe he's in the last year of his contract as well. So it's not like the Cardinals are committed to him after this year, and that might be the perfect scenario. It's just a matter of what would it take to bring him in? What would the Rangers want, and do the Cardinals have it?
Well, and it might come down to eating some of that money. Although I think the Mets are still eating a big chunk of his contract when they traded him last year. Real quick, conspiracy theory. Another thing that could bring Max to St. Louis. Who was Max Scherzer's pitching teammate for the Mizzou Tigers during their run together? I think him and Mr. Kyle Gibson may have pitched together at Mizzou.
I mean, that's a pretty good selling point right there. Finish up your career, win a World Series with the guy you pitched with in college, and doing it in your own home city. I mean, that's a pretty good proposition right there.
It could be. It could be. We'll start the rumors. Anybody that's watched this show knows that we love to start trade rumors, and sometimes they pay off at the end.
We did get Nolan Arenado here to St. Louis.
We did. There's even shirts that prove it.
There are. It's in my drawer right now. We can pull that one out and we can showcase it. We'll have to cover up a certain name on there. But yeah, I mean, we were the ones that instigated the Nolan Arenado trade. Just saying. And you know what? Tom Ackerman will back us up. So when we have him on here in the next couple of weeks, he can corroborate that. Yeah,
that one of those shirts hung in the sports office at KMOX for a while.
That it did. So, yeah, there you go. So, here you go. Mark it down. Max Scherzer going to be sticking around with the Cardinals after the Rangers series here at the end of July. Book it. All right, let's talk a little bit about some of the all-star selections. The final rosters came out today. Cardinals only get one all-star, and that's Ryan Helsley. Leads the MLB in saves with 31. Obviously, get a couple more before the all-star break next weekend. So, a little surprising. We were talking about this off-air. Sonny Gray was probably in contention until the last couple of starts. Kyle Gibson put himself on the fringe with the way he's been pitching as of late. Mason Wynn could have gotten in as well, but there are 5 or 6 shortstops in the National League that are just incredible, and some of them in their second years. And that was one of the things we talked about, was the fact that we've got another generation of shortstops that are going to make things so much more enjoyable to watch as the years go on.
Yeah, they really do. The National Leagues, we're kind of in the glory years. Remember in the late '90s when the American League had Jeter and A-Rod and Nomar and all of those guys? We've kind of got our version of that in the National League going on right now with De La Cruz and Cruz in Pittsburgh and Mason and the kid in San Diego. And it's pretty impressive to watch.
It is, and it makes me excited because obviously being in St. Louis, you grew up an Ozzie Smith fan, but you had the Barry Larkins and you had, the Aussies and all of that growing up. So it's nice to see that. And not only that, you've also got a guy over in KC who made the All-Star game first year for him, and that's Bobby Witt Jr. He'll join Salvador Perez, Seth Lugo, and Cole Reagans from the Royals on the All-Star team for the American League. And again, it's another young player in this city, in this town, that is really making things exciting for the Royals. Yes, maybe they've slipped a little bit in the AL Central, but they're still playing exciting baseball, and it's because of guys like Witt and Salvador Perez, who's not so much a young player, but those guys are really ramping up Royals baseball as well.
Yeah, and Salvador Perez has really carried on the tradition. We know what a huge Yachty fan and what a huge inspiration Yachty was for him, and he's definitely carried on Yachty's legacy, is just continuing to be a Gold Glove, All-Star, MVP type player late into his career, like Yachty did for so many years here in St. Louis.
Yeah, he certainly has, and it's awesome to see that, and Wilson Contreras has kind of done a little bit of that here in St. Louis in his 2 years. Yeah, he kind of got thrown under the bus last year, but he showed that fire and obviously came back from the injury. He's had 3 home runs in his last 5 games. So, the catching pedigree in the state of Missouri is very, very strong. Other noteworthy selections, you mentioned Ellie De La Cruz got in, Gunnar Henderson got in for the American League for Baltimore. Paul Skeens is a potential starter for the National League as well, which just goes to show you how good of a prospect this guy is and what he's been able to do for Pittsburgh. And then another Mizzou connection, Tanner Houck, is also in for the American League as well. So some familiar faces, some exciting young talent that's going to be on display in the All-Star game as well. And, again, the Cardinals just getting the 1 selection, but still, I'm excited. I haven't been excited to watch an All-Star game in a while. This one will pique my interest just to see some of these young players get a chance to showcase their skills on the national stage.
Yeah, you've got a bunch of really good young players that are really going to make a name for themselves and, kind of hit that national stage, where a lot of people may not know some of these names. They're really going to make a move. It's funny, if you're a baseball fan, guys' names, but I was listening to ESPN radio the other day and they were talking about the home run derby. And they're like, man, who wants to watch this home run derby? There's no Judge. He's not going to be in it. Ohtani said he's not going to be in it. They're like, who's this Gunnar Henderson? They're like, who wants to watch this kid? Somebody nobody's ever heard of. Gunnar Henderson's probably going to be the American League MVP in his second year. The kid's such a stud that there are some rumors that the Orioles may shop Jackson Holliday at the trade deadline for a pitcher or a relief pitcher just because of the fact that he's kind of blocked. He's going to have to play second base in Baltimore because I don't think they're moving. That spot open for him anytime soon because Gunnar's had quite a year and a half in the major leagues.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's interesting that they went the route of drafting a Jackson Holliday, considering they had Henderson already there. Yes, obviously you don't know because he is so young what you actually have, but it's nice to kind of have that embarrassment of riches. And I don't know if they're seriously going to consider trading a Jackson Holliday, because if you're able to have a guy over at second base, if you can have the Henderson Holliday connection at second and short, we're already seeing it with Gorman and Wynn here in St. Louis. And, Gorman had to make the switch over to second base. He's done a phenomenal job of adjusting to that. And that's coming from a guy that didn't play shortstop. You got a guy like Holliday that has played shortstop, knows, how to play a middle infield position. It is different playing second base because you're on the other side of the bag. It's different angles and all of that kind of stuff. But he's also still young enough that, he can make that adjustment and find a way to make that connection. You're going to have to blow me away with a trade if you're Baltimore, and to move a guy like Holliday that you just drafted, who has good pedigree, has an exciting ceiling, and could set you up in the middle infield for years to come.
All right. How All right, let's play general manager real quick. Say you're the Orioles, you've got all this young talent, and you've got Corbin Burns, who you may not have next year, but you can really make a run. Say you could trade Jackson Holiday to the White Sox for Crochet and have Burns and Crochet 1-2 in your rotation.
Oh man. I still think I'm hesitant to do it because I don't know if I would throw 1 year away for a potential of 5, 6, 7 year run. Yes, I mean obviously you got to have the pitchers to help you get to that point anyway, but trading a potential 6, 7 year run for 1 year and a guy that yes is very, very solid, but neither are guaranteed. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
I don't think I make that deal. I mean, it has to be an absolute world beater for me. I mean, it's got to be something that's going to set myself up for not just this year, but maybe the next 2 or 3 years of getting to the World Series and potentially winning 2 or 3 in that time frame as well.
Yeah, the other rumor that I heard, and I can't think of the kid's name right now, but the closer in Oakland that's throwing harder than anybody, that's got like 5 years of eligibility left before he's a free agent. I've heard that rumor too, that maybe Jackson Holiday is a piece that Baltimore would throw out there because Holiday's kind of frustrated that he's blocked and isn't playing in the major leagues. So I don't know that he'd want to go to Oakland, but
Oakland, Vegas,
Right. Well, and you still got a couple of years before Vegas. What you're playing in Sacramento for the next couple of years in a minor league stadium if you go to Oakland. But something like that, maybe they look at. I don't know. I'm with you. I'm not sure that I trade a position player with the upside that Holiday has for any pitcher, just because pitcher can look amazing, but one shoulder injury or one elbow injury, and that whole thing changes really quickly.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that one. So, like I said, it has to be an absolute world beater, and I wouldn't say a guaranteed World Series victory, but if you don't make it to the World Series after making a trade like that, it's going to look absolutely horrific if you're a Baltimore fan. So we'll see how it goes. Obviously, so many rumors that are going to be going out there in the next handful of weeks before the trade deadline. So we got plenty to talk about as we move forward and get closer and closer to that trade deadline. All right, we're going to step aside real quick. Come back, we'll talk a little bit about the off seasons of the NHL and the NBA. Yes, unfortunately, we are going to talk a little bit about LeBron and Bronny. I'm sorry, but we have to. We'll be right back on the Toasted Tavern. All right, the all season in NBA and NHL realms has gotten off to a fun start. Both leagues have had their drafts. Free agency has opened up, so lots of moving pieces have been going around. And I kind of want to see what you think. What league has had the best off season? I mean, you look at the NBA. Obviously, you've got the fact that Bronny James is coming into the league. LeBron, super excited about that, being able to play with his son on the Lakers. He opted out of his contract, re-signed for less than the max to help the cap, all of that kind of stuff. Everything, yesterday was Bronny's debut. Everybody was pumped about it. He was plastered all over ESPN. He scored 4 points. So
he was 2 of 9 from the field. He's going to be a stud, man. Just wait.
So you got that. Obviously, DeMar DeRozan signed in Sacramento for 3 years. That's a big deal for the Kings. It's a franchise that's kind of been left for dead since their little run during the Lakers dynasty. That was a big time for the Kings, and ever since then it's kind of been but a guy like DeRozan coming in could potentially boost things back up for Sacramento, especially if the Lakers struggle the way I think the Lakers are going to struggle this year with an aging LeBron and Bronny in there as well. So that's an interesting piece of information to kind of keep an eye on as well. Obviously, you got Olympic qualification going on as well. So some of your big stars aren't playing in these summer league games. They weren't really going to be playing in them anyway. But you're also kind of getting a little bit of that disconnect between, star players getting to become accustomed with these rookies coming in. So a little bit of, intrigue there as well. A guy like Giannis isn't going to be here for a while because he's going to be playing in the Olympics. So those are things to kind of keep an eye on as well. Flipping it over to the NHL, you have the draft. Macklin Celebrini went number 1 overall. He's opted out of college. He's going to sign. He signed with the Sharks, so he'll be playing with them this year. You've got teams like Nashville spending an insane amount of money on 3 players that are, well, one of them is aging pretty quickly in Steven Stamkos, but you got Marcia Show and Brady Shea in there as well. So they're boosting things up this way as well. The free agent spending has just been off the charts for the NHL this year in anticipation of the salary cap going up as well. So when you look at that, and I know that the NHL is kind of a niche sport, whereas the NBA is definitely much more popular, especially because of their global reach. But would you consider maybe the NHL having the better offseason so far?
I think it's possible because we've seen some bigger names in the NHL side. I mean, there wasn't really that blockbuster superstar in the NBA that was a free agent this year. Although, while we're talking about it real quickly, shout out to NBA champion and St. Louis native Jason Tatum for signing the biggest contract in NBA history.
314 too.
Yep, pretty amazing. You know, Jason, if you want to jump on the radio in St. Louis anytime soon, we are available. We can reach out to your dad, your Uncle Larry, whatever it takes to get you on here. But congratulations to Jason. But yeah, I think the NHL has done a really nice job of really kind of stealing some of the headlines from the NBA in free agency this year. And I want to go back to something real quick. NBA, I hate talking about him. Let's talk about the Lakers for like 5 seconds, and then we'll move on and hopefully not have to talk about them for another year. So the Lakers go out and they sign Bronny, or they draft Bronny. Okay, we're going to draft him in the second round. It's a developmental thing. He's going to play with LeBron. But it's going to be okay. We're not wasting a pick because LeBron's going to rework his contract. He's going to opt out, and he's not going to sign a Supermax contract. He's going to opt out. He's going to take less money. We're going to be able to go out and sign some free agents to make up for the fact that we wasted a draft pick on Bronny. What does LeBron do? He opts out. He signs a Supermax. He signed 2 years, $108 million. He's making $54 million a year, and now the Lakers have no money to sign anybody. What? How can anybody look at this guy and say he's good for basketball or society in general? I'm sorry. I know he does some decent things sometimes, but for the most part, he is just the most spoiled, overrated, me person I've ever seen. It just drives me crazy. I'm sorry.
Well, and you look at it and it's okay. Is he at all about winning? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, he's a guy that has jumped team to team to team. And yes, he did bring some guys together in Miami. They did go on a bit of a run and all of that. He did win a championship in Cleveland, which he did promise to do. So, I mean, yes, he has done things to win championships, but it just feels like, ever since he made that move to LA, it's just been about the brand and the name and being able to link it to the Lakers, and it's Lakers and LeBron together. The fact that they're going to be coached by JJ Redick, a guy that has zero coaching experience outside of volunteering for some middle school team. That's who they have to lead this team, and it sets it up to be. This is something that's going to be. It's LeBron's team. JJ Redick's just the scapegoat for anything that goes wrong. And I'm no fan of JJ Redick because he went to Duke. I'm a North Carolina fan. I still respect the fact that he talks about the things that he talks about on the shows that he's been on. He doesn't shy away from things. But I mean, come on, man. Yeah, you're essentially hooking yourself to the star of LeBron and the Lakers. And I don't know if it's going to do something good for you or not, because this could be something that goes up in flames very, very quickly. And we all know the drama that has surrounded the Lakers really forever. This may be the most inflammatory time for Lakers fans and the city of Los Angeles. And it's not because it's going to be, I'm trying to think of the right word. It's just,
it's going to be bad.
It's going to be bad. It's not going to be like negative as far as personalities are concerned. It's just going to be bad for the organization. And I feel for Lakers fans that, yes, you may have the biggest name in the league, but you're not going to win anything.
No. If you're a Laker fan, how do you look at this? How do you look at Jeannie Buss and Rob Pelinka and say, how did you let one of the greatest organizations in the NBA, a team that, you think about the amazing Lakers teams and you think about Kareem, and you think about Pat Riley, and you think about Magic and Worthy, and Shaq and Kobe and Phil, and now you have LeBron running things, and JJ Redick is your head coach because he hosts a podcast with LeBron, and Bronny, you wasted a draft pick on Bronny, who's probably not going to play for maybe a couple of years in the NBA. He's going to be in the developmental league because he's not very good. I mean, how does a team like the Lakers, how does this happen? How do you, as an ownership and a general manager of such a great organization, how do you let this happen? And are the Clippers now the NBA team of Los Angeles?
It's very, very possible that they are. And, any LA fans that are watching or listening, obviously we're outside of that realm because we're in the Midwest, and obviously we don't have an NBA team. So it's harder to follow the league as a whole, just because the interest is not as big because we don't have a rooting interest in there. But, what is the feeling of Lakers fans? Because I have to think that there's a lot of consternation that's going around in that area. And yeah, like you said, the Clippers could be the LA team. And I'll be honest, I know Sacramento's not in LA, obviously, but could Sacramento start to siphon off some of that popularity and bring it down there, especially again with the fact that they brought in DeRozan and all of that? Is this a changing of the guard in that area to where it's not the Lakers anymore, it's the Clippers and maybe even the Kings before the Lakers are even thought of?
Yeah, I think you're really starting to look at that. When like you said, Sacramento with what DeMar DeRozan has done with going out and getting DeMar DeRozan to add to Darren Fox and to that team, I think that's really going to make them better. The Clippers, losing Paul George is going to hurt the Clippers, but I think they're moving into that new arena. I think that's going to kind of bring fans there. The celebrities have kind of started to make their way from the Lakers to the Clippers to be seen in that area. And then, Golden State's stolen a lot of the thunder from the Lakers. I know it's in the San Francisco area, but with what they've done, that's kind of affected it too. So, I mean, the Lakers aren't the marquee name that they were, 10 years ago or 20 years ago. They're just not. And, like you said, since LeBron's moved there, it's not about the money. Or not about winning. It's about the money and building his brand and being able to make god awful movies. How many of those has he made in the last 3 or 4 years?
Too many to count. And I'm just looking at the Lakers roster right now, and obviously not set in stone because it's still the preseason and the offseason. I mean, you got D'Angelo Russell. Okay, you got Anthony Davis, but he's a guy that has dealt with a lot of injury in his career, and it almost has seemed like he's not been able to take that next step to be the guy in a place. And obviously he's following in the footsteps of what LeBron is doing as well. So who knows if he actually is going to be the guy. And, looking at everything else, everybody else in the team, I don't see anybody else on this team that I'm like, yeah, that's a guy that really scares me or is a complementary piece that can take some pressure off of LeBron and AD. There's just nobody really on that team. And that's not to say they don't have good players, but not the players that you need to, support two guys, especially an aging star like LeBron.
Well, no, and it all started falling apart when again they gave LeBron all the power and said, "Hey, yeah, you know what we should do? Let's go get Carmelo Anthony and Russell Westbrook and everybody else that you've ever been friends with, and let's bring them all here, even though they're all past their prime at this point, and so are you." And, we do have Anthony Davis who can't play more than 40 games a season, and let's see what happens. And it's fallen apart. And it's just gotten worse and worse. And it's kind of sad because as somebody who did grow up a Laker fan, because, man, I love Magic and Worthy and Kareem and watching all of those guys, Michael Cooper and, everybody that played on those teams, to see what it's become now. It is kind of sad.
It is. I mean, even going through the Kobe and Shaq days,
right.
It continued on, and now it's kind of a bit of a shell of itself. So, all right, that's enough. That's the Lakers talk. That's the LeBron talk. We don't have to talk about him until something else big happens, either blowing up in somebody's face or what have you. Let's talk a little bit more about the NHL real quick before we jump to a couple other topics. We'll kind of focus more so in on what the Blues are doing. They signed Pavel Buchnevich to a 6-year extension. they were not very active in free agency. They re-signed Kasperi Kapanen. They made a couple of small minor trades to shore up the third and fourth lines, a depth defensive signing as well. But outside of that, nothing really, really big outside of the Buchnevich signing. And I know a lot of fans are highly upset about the lack of movement that the Blues have done in this offseason. And I'm just going to sit back and say, proceed with caution on your negativity for this Blues organization, because I think this team, while not a division winner, has the pedigree and the talent to be a team that can get into the playoffs and potentially make some noise. And that's also being said with the fact that they've got a very young, kind of rookie-ish head coach, but they did bring in Claude Julien to be an assistant on the bench, which is a huge pickup. They are starting the transition plan from Doug Armstrong to Alexander Steen. They've got a lot of good young players. They made some really smart picks in the draft as well. So, yes, maybe the next couple of years may be middling, but this is a team and an organization that can make the playoffs. And how many years did we go with this team making the playoffs and being somewhat of a middling team? A good amount. I mean, they had the longest streak in NHL history as far as making the playoffs and yet never won a Stanley Cup. We might be in the beginnings of another such run where it's a team that maybe isn't going to be a world-beating team, maybe not wins the Stanley Cup, but maybe starts setting the tone for what this organization is going to be in 4, 5, 6 years and maybe beyond that. So, yes, it's going to be a possible tough season, but I'm okay with what they've done so far and kind of where the direction of this team is going.
Well, I don't know. Like you said, fans are upset. I don't know what you expected. I don't know how you could look at this team and go, man, they need to go out and just spend a ton of money on high-priced free agents. That's the way we need to go right now. No, you've got all this talent coming. Like you said, it's going to be a year or two before you get some of these guys here. Dvorsky and some of these guys are still – well, maybe you see Dvorsky at some point this season.
I think so.
But he's going to be a rookie and going to make mistakes and isn't going to be the player that he will be in a couple of years this year. But you've got, other guys that are right on the cusp that are still in college that are draft picks that are coming in a year or two. And honestly, I think this team may take a step back. I don't think they're going to be a playoff team. I think they're probably going to be worse than they were last year. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because you're going to have all of these kids that you brought up and they're going to all be trying to make that next step. And that's what you have to do. You have to bring these kids up and you have to let some of these guys learn and go through the growing pains so that when your even higher picks, your even more talented kids come, these guys have gone through it a little bit and they can start to be that leadership group that shows those guys how to go through the growing pains and how to deal with things not being as easy as they were in college or in Europe or wherever you may have played juniors, wherever they may have played before. And in saying that, I think Robert Thomas is going to get even better. I think he's going to take that next step this year. I think Jordan Kyrou, I know he's still a lightning rod, but we saw Jordan Kyrou make some pretty big steps towards the end of the year last year. His defense got better. He started playing an all-around game a little bit more. I mean, you still want to see more from him, but you can definitely see some effort towards the end of the season that he was trying to become more of a well-rounded player. I think that happens. I think they're going to make steps, but like I said, I expect them to be a little worse this year, but I think it's going to be a growing pains year. I think it's a year that you need to have to get some of these young kids to that next step. So like I said, they can be that leadership group when your even better young prospects get here in a year or two. And, a lot of it's going to come down to what your goalie does. Can Jordan Binnington be the guy again this year? And your decor, what do you do with that decor? Because you're still looking at the same four guys being the four guys. Can Colton Parayko play like he did in the second half of last year and really look like the guy that he was a couple of years ago and be that leader and do some of these guys play a little bit better? Does Torrey Krug find another gear? Does, do some of these guys figure it out? It's going to be an interesting year. I think fans are going to be, like we said, frustrated, but I think it's just another year in the process to 3 or 4 years from now being where they want to be.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right there. I talked about this with Mason when he joined me a couple weeks ago. Look at what Vladimir Tarasenko was like in the first couple of years of his time here in St. Louis. he was maligned for his defensive capabilities. By the time he left here, he was on the penalty kill. He was a defensive person that you put out there in those crucial moments. So yeah, Jordan Kyrou, you're seeing the progression. So if you can continue to see that in this year, that's another positive step going forward as well. You still got a guy like Jimmy Snuggerud, who's, going back to Minnesota this year. Obviously, like you said, Dvorsky is going to be a guy that could potentially make some noise here. A couple of the draft picks from this year are potential options as well. So lots of things to look forward to if you're a St. Louis Blues fan. We'll get into that a little bit more as we get closer to the preseason and the start of the regular season. But before we wrap up here tonight, we got to talk about the biggest controversy in sports in the last week. And it was a doozy for sure. And that's the fact that Joey Chestnut was banned from the Nathan's hot dog eating contest at Coney Island because he signed with Impossible Foods. I've never been this excited about watching people eat in all of my life. And that's saying something, because I was excited when he went for the world record a couple of years ago when he ended up hitting 76 hot dogs. But this was something that I was just like, I was hooked. I sat down, I watched the women's competition. Miki Soto set a world record for 51 hot dogs consumed, 10th title for her. And then I had to watch the men's competition to see what ended up happening. Patrick Bertoletti ate 58 hot dogs and buns in 10 minutes, which, that's a pretty good number. I mean, you're sitting there going, God damn, I would be puking my guts out after 4 maybe. But 58 he consumed in 10 minutes. Now remember, keep that in mind. Keep that 10-minute mark in mind. Joey Chestnut, okay, he was down at Fort Bliss, and he had a competition against 4 U.S. soldiers. It was a 5-minute competition. Do you know how many hot dogs he ate in 5 minutes?
I don't. I'm afraid to hear what this number was, though.
57. He
Wow.
ate one less than the winner of the Nathan's hot dog contest that did it in 10 minutes. He did it in 5 minutes, which just goes to show you how incredibly talented he is. And that is definitely a question mark after the word talented. But like I said, I was intrigued by it. They did it, maybe it was a publicity stunt. Maybe this is something, maybe they thought, fans were waning in their viewership of it, and this is what's bringing people back to competitive eating. I don't know, but what are your thoughts on the controversy of the week?
Yeah, it's crazy. It definitely wasn't the same when you heard Joey Chestnut wasn't going to be in it, but the guy's doing okay. He signed a contract and he's making a living as a very nice living for himself as a professional eater. So I guess he's doing okay, man. I couldn't do it. I almost gag watching him eat it. I'm like, oh.
I know when the timer sounded at the contest this year, they had a shot of the guy that ended up winning it, and his cheeks were just bulged out. You could see just wet hot dog bun on his face, and you're just like, oh my gosh, I don't know why I'm watching this, but I am hooked for some reason. I don't know, but I don't know how anybody can do that as well. The other really intriguing piece to this is the fact that Chestnut is going to face off against a competitor that he hasn't faced in 15 years. That'd be Kobayashi. They're going to be meeting on Netflix on September 2nd to kind of settle who's the greatest eater of all time. So definitely check out on Netflix on September 2nd. First time in 15 years, these two are going to be going head-to-head in a hot dog eating contest. I got my money on Chestnut, but, Kobayashi was a revelation when he came over to the U.S.
Wow, that'll be must-see television for some people, I'm sure. It'll be entertaining, I guess, right?
It'll be something. It's something for sure.
It is something.
Just don't eat a big meal before watching it, because you don't want it coming back up.
Exactly.
All right, well, we're wrapping things up here. Scott, anything you got to put out there or talk about before we head out tonight?
Real quick, appreciate everybody that watches and pays attention, and keep watching in the next couple of weeks, because in the next few weeks, we're still working on exact dates, but our friend Tom Ackerman, who we talked about, sports director for KMOX, is going to be on. One of our friends from the Negro League Museum, Bob Kendrick or Dr. Raymond Doswell, will be joining us in the next few weeks. And as we're approaching college football season, Tiger Mike himself, Mr. Mike Kelly, is going to be joining us sometime in the next few weeks as well to preview Tiger football, which if you're a Mizzou Tiger fan and you've seen the news the last week, you're just getting more and more and more excited about what this program is becoming.
Oh, very much so. Lots of exciting things happening for the Mizzou football program. We'll talk about that here in the near future. All right, that's going to do it for us. Thanks for joining us. Hope you had a great Independence Day weekend. We'll see you next Sunday right here on the Toasted Tavern.